Since officially assuming the G20 presidency on the 1st December 2024, South Africa has convened 51 meetings across all the Sherpa tracks and finance track working groups, including the 3 task forces established by our presidency. These meetings discussed some of the most important and urgent challenges facing the global community, reflecting on our strong determination to seek sustainable and innovative solutions through dialogue, collaboration, and cooperation. The ongoing G20 discussions are aimed at advancing South Africa's overarching priorities, namely strengthening disaster resilience and response, ensuring debt sustainability for low-income countries, mobilizing finance for a just energy transition, harnessing critical minerals for inclusive growth and sustainable development. You will recall that our task forces are focusing on inclusive economic growth, industrialization, employment, and reduced inequality, food security and reduced inequality, and artificial intelligence, data governance, innovations for sustainable development. Throughout the working groups, we are also championing broader and cross-cutting issues, such as the reform of multilateral trading systems and the international financial architecture, including strengthening of multilateral development banks, seeking solutions to addressing climate change, promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion, advocating for gender equality, pursuing enhanced international tax cooperation, and addressing illicit financial flows, exploring ways to increase the predictability, scale, and flows of climate finance, which is critical to enable the just transition and mitigation and adaptation efforts. From the recent meetings, it is important to note that whilst there are debates on some issues as to be expected in multilateral arrangements, there is still overwhelming support for South Africa's priorities by G20 members. Furthermore, when our G20 Sherpa briefing, the United Nations General Assembly in New York, on our G20 priorities in March 2025, the meeting also expressed strong support for our G20 presidency agenda. G20 A20 review. At the 2024 Rio de Janeiro summit, G20 leaders made a commitment to evaluate the G20 first full cycle of presidencies under South Africa's presidency, and with full respect to the principles and agreed at the Cairns summit in 2011, provide recommendations to the second cycle, including a roadmap for future presidencies. They also reiterated their ambitions for G20 to remain the premier forum for international economic cooperation. In this spirit, South Africa's G20 presidency is championing a review G20 A20 that reflects on the G20's achievements and working methods since 2008 as proposed leaders level outcome. This review was welcomed by the G20 members at the first Sherpa meeting in Sandton in December 2024. Further, the G20 A20 review roadmap was presented at the second Sherpa's meeting that took place in early April 2025. The G20 A20 review will reflect on the diverse national views of G20 members and permanent guest countries, including through a survey, a dedicated discussion at the third G20 Sherpa meeting in June, and written consultations. The findings of the survey, compendium, and Sherpa discussions will be synthesized into a high-level report for the presentation and proposed endorsement by the G20 leaders at the G20 Johannesburg summit later in November. A commitment to a rules-based multilateralism. South Africa's G20 presidency stands firm in the belief that multilateral cooperation is not optional, it is an imperative. Unilateral actions that undermine the rules-based order risk reversing decades of progress. It is for these reasons that the first G20 Foreign Ministers meeting held in February 2025 noted that 2025 will mark the 80th anniversary of the United Nations and reaffirmed the commitment to strengthen multilateralism and that all states must act in a manner consistent with the purpose and principles of the UN Charter. Underscored the need to reform international systems of global governance, inclusive of the international financial architecture, the multilateral trading system, and the multilateral development banks. further stressed the need to reform the United Nations to make it fit for purpose and relevant to the current international reality. This includes the Security Council. Noted with concern the slow progress being made in the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, of the 2030 Agenda. To this end, the meeting stressed on the need for urgent actions to accelerate efforts and reaffirm the G20 strong commitment to the SDGs in line with the theme, solidarity, equality, and sustainability. In addition, at the second G20 Sherpa meeting held in April 2025, many delegations, including South Africa, expressed serious concerns about the resurgence of protectionism and unilateral measures that undermine multilateral trading system and reaffirmed the need for collective actions to honor and strengthen our WTO commitments, including the principle of special and differential treatment while advancing necessary reforms. Resolve trade disputes through constructive dialogue and established mechanisms. Ensure trade policies actively support sustainable development objectives, particularly Africa's industrialization and transition to a value-added production at source. An inclusive and a people-centered G20. The majority of the 15 official G20 engagement groups have been constituted, having defined their priorities and are working on their deliverables. We have also had several consultative engagements with local and international civil society organizations around the hosting of the second G20 Social Summit, following the first such initiative under Brazil's presidency last year in Rio. The engagement groups and social summit are critical to ensure that the G20 agenda is more democratic and inclusive and comprehensive, and that those people who are impacted by the decisions of the G20 are heard. At the forthcoming Sherpa meeting to be held in the last week of June 2025 in Sun City, in the Northwest Province, engagement groups will have the opportunity to make their formal submissions to the G20 on issues they propose for inclusion in the G20 leaders' declarations to be negotiated and adopted by leaders in November 2025. In the current geopolitical and geo-economic global headwinds, there are high expectations on South Africa to deliver positive outcomes, advance innovative solutions to global challenges, and rebuild the trust of the international community in the G20. Cultural diplomacy, Africa's Call. I am proud to announce the release on the 9th of May of Africa's Call, a song that embodies and reflects the spirit of Ubuntu, our African identity, and G20's presidency mission. This anthem, now streaming globally, it's a reminder that culture and our common humanity unite us even as we debate and sometimes disagree on policies. I invite all citizens to listen, share, and let this message of hope to resonate in all communities across South Africa, the African continent, and the globe. The road ahead, priorities for action. Over the next few months, until 7 November 2025, the Sherpa and Finance Track working groups will continue to meet to discuss their priorities and deliverables and negotiate and issue ministerial declarations. The third Sherpa meeting to be held from the 25th to the 27th of June 2025 is expected to further discuss geopolitical issues and the contribution of the G20 to the global development agenda and in fostering equitable global governance. Chairs of the 15 G20 engagement groups will also be invited to participate and report on their progress at the third Sherpa meeting. We are also planning to host two important meetings outside South Africa. Firstly, a G20 Compact with Africa meeting in Addis Ababa in July 2025. You will recall that during our presidency, we are pursuing a broadened and effective G20 Compact with Africa, which include increasing number of participating African Union members. Secondly, we will host the second G20 Foreign Ministers meeting in New York in September 2025 on the margins of the United Nations General Assembly High-Level Week. This will be the second time ever that a G20 meeting is held at the United Nations after the Brazil historic hosting of the same meeting last year. The United Nations, at the core of which is the General Assembly, with its universal representation where every country participates on an equal footing, is and will remain the chief deliberative and policy-making and representative organ of the global community of nations. Therefore, the work we do in the G20 and informal grouping seeks to support, contribute, and reinforce already existing processes of the United Nations and its organs in a complementary manner. Finally, we are undertaking logistical preparations for the hosting of the Leaders Summit in Johannesburg in November 2025. As you can imagine, the summit is a major project requiring significant planning, coordination, and project management. We have put together an excellent team from across government and the private sector to oversee and implement this successful summit. We are also glad to be partnering with the Gauteng City region, including the city of Johannesburg, to prepare for this summit. We believe that we are on track. To the people of South Africa, this presidency is yours, is your platform. Engage with it, own it, and hold us accountable. Progress is not just defined by the meetings or by the number of documents we deliver. Progress is defined by finding concrete and collective solutions to our challenges, and by how we improve the lives of all citizens, in particular the most vulnerable and the most needy. From Johannesburg to Rio de Janeiro, to Washington, to Abuja, the impacts and the outcomes of the G20 must be felt in the streets of such cities and to the local communities of the world. We remain guided by the wisdom of Madiba, who taught us that it is in your hands to create a better world for all who live in it. I thank you.